order the study session for February the 3rd, 2025 for the City Council for the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado. We have two study items on our agenda tonight. Item number one is the digital billboard and signage and signs. Item number two is a 2025 legislative agenda. We will start our meeting as we usually do with comments from the public on any item that is on the agenda. So one of those two items. We have no one signed up to speak in City Council, but we do have one person signed up to speak online. It looks like Steve Shin is joining us online. Mr. Shin, if you would please unmute and introduce yourself. If you would please spell your last name and tell us whether you live or work in Wheat Ridge and which agenda item you're speaking to.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Steve Shin. I'm speaking on the digital billboard and sign item that's before you. I represent Outfront Media, whose address is 4647 Layden Street in Denver, Colorado. While we don't have an office there in the city, we do operate 7 of the 15 billboards along the I-70 corridor. Outfront Media Company is one of the largest outdoor advertising companies in the country and in the state of Colorado. In the past few years, we have developed new digital billboards in the city of Arvada, 2 on I-70 west of Sheridan and 2 on I-70 west of Wadsworth Boulevard. In addition, we have experience with developing digital billboards on public property. Last year, we partnered with the Auraria Higher Education Center and developed 3 new digital billboards on their college campus properties along Spear Boulevard and Auraria Parkway in downtown Denver. If you decide to move forward with this, with allowing digital billboards on public or private property, we would be very interested in this opportunity. We feel those are many benefits that the city could achieve, such as use of advertising space for public messaging and other community benefits. We would highly recommend that if the council moves forward with any city-owned properties, it would be in their best interest to follow the public procurement process to ensure the best deal for Wheat Ridge and their residents. I'm happy to answer any questions at this time or provide additional information to you or staff if this item moves forward for more discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shin. We have no other speakers, so I'm going to go to Mr. Goff. Staff presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll introduce it and turn it over to Lauren. Our city attorney is here also this evening as well to help with the discussion. And we do have representatives from Lamar Advertising that will like to speak during this item as well. So the representatives from billboard companies have contacted the city, and I believe all of you individually, concerning digital billboards and electronic messaging boards and a public-private partnership related to digital ad sales. As you may remember, the city code currently prohibits digital billboards in Wheat Ridge, and electronic message boards are only allowed in certain zone districts under certain conditions. Consensus was reached by City Council at your January 6th study session to bring this item back for further discussion. That's why we're here this evening. Lauren will summarize our current code restrictions, provide options for City Council to consider if you choose to make any changes to current policy. Lauren.
Yes, thank you. So as Patrick mentions, I'm neutral tonight. You'll notice we didn't make any specific staff recommendations in the memo, but want to explain some of the code implications and process if there is a desire to amend the code. The way that we formatted this memo was to break down the proposal into 3 different categories. So just briefly, I'll talk about digital billboards, signs on city-owned properties, and then the third piece is that public-private partnership proposal. For billboards, when we saw you last year, we expressly prohibited a longstanding policy that digital billboards are prohibited in Wheat Ridge. If there is a desire to allow them, it's just a couple of steps to do a code amendment. We'd need to expressly allow them. And then we'd also need to come up with some standards. How many digital billboards? What's the separation? How quickly can they change? We know that CDOT has some regulations that would apply, but the city could add more strict regulations. So for example, if we followed CDOT separation, I think that we could have up to 7. We could allow fewer either through quantitative limits or through separation requirements. I think Denver has a 1-hour hold time on their messages. We can set sort of what the timing of the change is. And finally, we'd have to reinstate a review process. You'll recall that when we used to have vacancies of billboards, we did a lottery process instead of first come, first serve. That is a process we have in a couple different places in the code. And if council does want to allow digital billboards, that would be the recommendation, would be a lottery. Setting billboards aside for a minute, signs on city-owned property. This came up because the idea of doing public-private partnership, obviously the logical question is, what kind of signs are allowed on city-owned property? You probably know that a park or governmental facility is allowed in almost every zone district. And so therefore, we have different sign standards that apply in all of our parks and city-owned properties because of all those different zones. So if we wanted to create more consistent sign standards when we get the question of what are signs allowed, whether that's from a billboard company or from our Parks Department, we could create a category in the sign code called city-owned signs, essentially. It's of the recommendations that certainly makes sense to me. We've muddled through as our facilities staff and park staff has come to us over the years to ask about new signs on city properties. And we don't really have a good answer if there's a sign in the right-of-way. The zoning code doesn't really apply to the right-of-way. So that middle paragraph of the memo talks about the idea of creating that category of signs on city-owned property. And then the third portion of your memo is really related to how we use a sign on city-owned property. We could make a sign and use it ourselves the way that we always have. We could have a sign that has a digital component and enter into the public-private partnership. What we could do, if that's something you desire, is to establish in the code sort of what that process would need to be, as you heard from our public comment earlier, whether it's through a procurement process. We did not get into a lot of detail in this memo until you provide some direction on all three of these topics. The one thing that we did flag is that we would need to evaluate a couple of code implications, off-premise signs, which are not currently permitted, and whether or not we're creating a public forum where we have less ability to sort of regulate speech. If somebody buys ad space on a sign on city property, we may or may not have the ability to sort of limit what those messages are. So again, we kept this memo pretty high. I'm happy to answer any questions. I think if you have direction to move forward on any of these three topics, digital billboards, city-owned signs, or public-private partnership, our next step would be to take that direction and come back to you in a study session format with more specific standards. The last thing I want to mention is the handout I put at your seat. We had a good question from Councilor Ohm about just putting the size of digital signs into context. So we grabbed 5 different signs that are around the city. So what you'll see is the zoning and the square footage of the overall sign and the digital portion. We pulled one from 38th Avenue, so you're seeing the permit application and the street view. We pulled a couple from 38th Avenue, I think, one from Wadsworth, one from Youngfield, that's the Good Time one that's highway oriented, and one from the Apple Ridge Cafe at 38th and Kipling. None of these are digital billboards. These are all just regular digital signs. Digital billboards can be significantly larger than that. So it's a point of reference, and I'm happy to answer any questions that may come my way.
Continue.
Thank you, Mayor. We do have representatives this evening from Lamar that would like to speak with you. You can come to the podium, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Todd Messenger, Fairfield and Woods PC, 1801 California Street, Suite 2600, Denver, on behalf of Lamar tonight. Just a little bit about me. I am on both sides of the desk all the time. Tonight I represent Lamar, but I also represent municipalities and counties and whatnot. And I've been involved in zoning reform projects for 25 years, including probably a couple of dozen sign codes over the course of my career. So I've spent a lot of time in this space, both qualitatively and legally speaking, and just offer a couple of comments and perspective that we hope the council will consider as it moves forward with this important task. The first is with respect to how to deal with first come, first served versus lottery. We would hope that the council would consider first come, first served. That's how CDOT works when it does 1,000-foot spacing. If you have a digital billboard in place, all the other 1,000-foot spacings are from there. And in fact, in Wheat Ridge, medical and retail marijuana, social clubs, sexually oriented businesses, and liquor stores are all spaced based on a first come, first served. So you have a long tradition of this. And in zoning, we have a long tradition of first come, first serve as a spacing basis. Anytime you have a lottery, there's always the risk that it's going to be looked at askew. It always introduces that risk of distrust because it is in fact a game of chance. First come, first serve is verifiable immediately. It doesn't have any administrative overhead. You just punch the document received when it comes in with a timestamp and everybody knows what came in first. Second is that as far as digital billboards go, whether they be along the highway or whether they be digital partnership signs on municipal signs, they're really a good idea, and there's a lot of reasons for that. First is that a traditional static billboard aesthetically, particularly at night with the lights upcast on it reflecting off, they don't have the image that a digital billboard has aesthetically. The digital billboard has even lighting across it. They can be shielded to remove glare from certain locations. They can be shielded so that they don't cast glow up into the night sky. There's a reason why people don't like the appearance of billboards, and nighttime static billboards traditionally are part of that reason. Digital billboards more than make up for that. You've seen them. You've also seen on-premise cheap digital signage, and there's a huge difference between that and digital billboards run by, the bigger players in the industry. These are really expensive displays. They're really good quality, and they dim to about 10% brightness at night, so they don't get overpowering. They don't glare so that you can't look at them. So in that respect, just on their own, the ability to switch messages is very good for local businesses that can advertise on them. It is an economic development strategy. Not every local business has the advantage of being located right on I-70 where they can get that kind of traffic. The billboard equalizes that playing field and gives them that opportunity in a very geospatially targeted way to get their message across. Same for nonprofits, and there's always room on, in particular, Lamar billboards for nonprofits to be, given at cost or free in many cases, time on their digital billboards. The other thing I would say is that CDOT does regulate that brightness for the outdoor companies. They don't regulate it for others. So the highway billboards would be subject to those. And I guess the other thing is that when PSAs or public service announcements and emergency messaging are built in, it's a very big deal. Actually, the head of the FBI back in 2011, I think, and again in 2017, had talked about billboards as being a force multiplier in terms of investigations and finding, Amber Alerts and things like this that can go out in real time that can't be put out on static billboards at all. So these electronic systems, they allow you to have weather report or weather alerts, tornado alerts, hailstorms, whatever it may be, traffic alerts for what's going on ahead. CDOT has some of these on the highways. They're not very good. The digitals are better. You could put a full color image of somebody that's people are looking for in an Amber Alert. You can't do that on those low resolution CDOT signs. So these are very, very good assets to have in any community. And I'm also got a sort of a planning credential. From that credential, I would say these are a very good idea. They're very underrated in terms of their benefits to the community. In terms of signs on public property that are public-private partnerships, also a very good idea. So if the city builds its own digital signs for its own message, it has to run that, it has to maintain that, it has to make sure those displays are always working. If it partners with the company that does that as its business, not only does it have somebody else putting that infrastructure in place at no cost to the city, it also has somebody running it and making sure it's always working at no cost to the city, and selling some of that time for advertising, which generates revenue not just for the private company to make that project go, but shared with the city so that the city is making revenue with no initial capital outlay. So not only is it getting its messages across and dealing with emergency situations and whatnot, but is also displaying a high quality display at no cost and making money at the same time. In the era of Tabor, it's a great idea to supplement the city's revenue streams. So we just want to offer those perspectives, and we hope like the council will consider them as it moves forward. And if you have any questions, Steve Cecil from Lamar is here, and I'm here to answer questions that you might have. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
That's it for staff right now. We're here for any
Okay.
questions you may have.
We'll take questions from council. Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, everyone. So I don't really have questions. I'm just going to share my thoughts on the different issues that are presented here. My district, a lot of it backs to I-70. In fact, my neighbors across the street back to I-70. And one thing I've heard from them is that, anything that we can be doing to reduce the visual pollution is something that they would like to see us to take action on. I also am not a huge fan of digital advertising. I think, as was mentioned, like we don't have control over what it is. It's visually distracting when you're driving. The board that they mentioned at Auraria, and the big, I think they're technically calling it a piece of public art, but the big thing as you're going to DIA that has advertising in the middle of it is just really confusing to me about when is something like providing helpful information, when is it trying to sell me something. And I think we've had a lot of conversations since I've been elected about making our corridors like attractive, inviting places. And I think two of our main corridors, both 38th and sections and a lot of 44th, like really have visual pollution. We've got too many signs. It's not really clear, like for businesses to be seen. If we've got some places where we've got big bright signs and then other places are trying to get signs, I just think that like digital advertising is like a threshold of like working against what we're trying to do around building beautiful corridors, building trust with our community about what kind of messaging. Like we wouldn't have control if strip clubs wanted to advertise. I mean, I'm not saying that's likely, but like, I don't know if we want on 38th and Wadsworth a strip club to be advertising on our main street. So I don't feel it's necessary. I know the idea of revenue share is attractive. If we were here tonight listening to our local businesses telling us that what they want is more opportunities to like reach people off of Wadsworth or Kipling, but we're not hearing from our community. This is coming from outside our community. I'd be really happy to sit down and revisit this if business owners from 38 or business owners from Wadsworth were coming and saying, city, we want you to get more creative. But I feel like this is coming from outside. So I'm not supportive of the electronic advertising. That having been said, Councillor Ohm and I believe Janice for a long time, or actually I was thinking, oh my gosh, who was it? She's gone now. Anyway, have been talking for a long time about the city having some sort of messaging board at the rec center and or in front of City Hall. And I think I still would really like to see that happen. I think communicating with our community, and we talked about this at our retreat over the weekend, is really coming back to us in droves. We're hearing our community wants to know what's going on. Again, I'm not comfortable with doing a public-private partnership. I think our community trusts us when we're communicating with them, and if it's confusing, if they're hearing from an advertiser or the city, again, I think that just erodes a little bit of the public trust. So I am in support of figuring out how to get a message board on city property, but I'm not in favor of electronic advertising in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question would be kind of around the businesses that are allowed to rent the billboards or rent the space on the digital signage. Is that something we could write into the agreement, that there's certain categories of businesses that we allow?
For city-owned property, yes. For, billboards, that's not a property the city owns, and city doesn't restrict that content. But for city-owned property, did a little research just to be ready for that. We have to be a little concerned about, have we created a public forum on city property, just like, for example, we have here. We have a public forum here. People can come and speak. Sidewalks in front of City Hall are a classic public forum. But we can design the signs on city-owned property as a limited forum that is not public, and thereby impose pretty stringent requirements. The best analogy, and I've looked at the RTD regulations, for example, on the signage and the advertising RTD allows, they're public entities like we are, on light rail and buses and other properties. Really stringent in terms of limiting the commercial ads to not include any adult uses in any way, shape, or form, precluding, for example, advertising for marijuana, advertising for anything that's illegal. but also no advertising for certain legal businesses like adult businesses. And so the city has plenty of authority to limit the content on city-owned property to government messages effectively and a more narrow range of commercial messages. And again, just think about the ads you see on RTD, light rail and buses, and that'd be the category that you could restrict the city signs to.
I think generally for me, I'm in favor of moving forward and taking a look at this. For actually a lot of the things that Councilor Hulteen just said, we do need to build trust with our community, and we kind of saw a little bit of backlash when we got rid of the sirens and the warning notifications a couple months ago, or I guess about a year ago now. And I think having another ability to push out messages to our citizens and our residents here is huge. And as the representative from Lamar said, when that emergency happens, to be able to turn that billboard on to whatever that is, or turn that digital sign on to whatever we need them to see, that's pretty huge, and that's not something that we really have the ability to do right now. As far as a business owner goes, I know most local businesses won't be able to afford full placement up on some of the billboards, but if they're working with nonprofits and things like that to be able to advertise on some of those message boards, I think that's huge for our businesses as well. And I do think that the billboards on the highway that are stationary, or whatever they're called, they look old and they look tired. So the video ones that I've seen, there's a couple in Arvada, things like that, they just look a lot better. And if they're able to deaden the light so it doesn't look like, you guys remember the Seinfeld episode where Kenny Rogers opens up outside of Kramer's window, as long as it doesn't look like that, and it's not blaring through people's windows, I think that makes a whole lot of sense. So generally, I think I'm looking forward to hearing what the rest of you have to say, but I'm in favor of at least moving this forward to another study session and taking a look at some of those code revisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Larson.
I'll defer to Councilmember Dozeman first. Thank you. So I have a couple questions and then a few comments. So first, what are the materials that the static billboards are made of?
You want to come down, Lamar, to the...
Testing, 1, 2, 3. So, Steve
It's
Cecil
flat.
with Lamar Advertising in Thornton, Colorado. The current material that the billboards are made of right now are vinyl material that Lamar and typically the industry recycle when they are unused.
Okay. And on average, how much would a static billboard advertisement cost versus a snippet on a digital billboard?
So the cost, I would have to bring my sales manager here. It's pretty much the same. There actually isn't any difference, except it's saving the consumer the price of printing those materials. And it is just displayed immediately. So there's no landfill, there's no recycled materials that are needed. It is instant. So what the cost would be per period or per month, I'm unaware of, but it's pretty much the same, except the out-of-pocket for the actual materials itself.
And so with the other digital billboards that Lamar and other ad agencies own, if a business were to purchase like an ad on one billboard, would it be able to also be on others, like maybe outside of Wheat Ridge?
Absolutely. Yeah, so there's two parts of this, and I understand both are on the study session. One is conversions and one's kind of a public-private partnership. Lamar, I'll just speak on Lamar, actually, and not the industry. Lamar feels that communication is more beneficial than any other part of our industry. So we understand we have to make revenue to create communication capabilities, but we want you all to communicate whatever you need, whether it's in the city of Wheat Ridge or outside the city of Wheat Ridge. And we have a very far reach with, as it was mentioned earlier, with RTD. we have a very far reach with RTD platforms. We have digital displays throughout the county, throughout the city, throughout the state. And so our goal with the city of Wheat Ridge and with our other partners is to get your message out when it's needed. Whether that's emergency messaging, whether that's through weather alerts, whatever it is. And we utilize what's called Light Direct. And so I know there were some concerns earlier where it was, hey, this could hinder the neighboring communities. Our Light Direct technology only allows the folks that are intended to see this display to see it. So as soon as you get 30 degrees off center, it actually turns black, almost like your TV does. And so it is not meant to be destructive. It is truly meant to enhance the community of Wheat Ridge. So I am not here to try and sell a billboard. I'm here to help communicate whatever you all would like to your community.
Okay, so I actually just was that's all the questions I have right now, but I do have a few comments because I was driving along I-70 and they had a hit and run alert actually when I was coming east to the hospital. And so I know that there are, and even on C-470, you're talking about, CMV vehicles needing chains. And so I think the communication needs are definitely there. And there is a digital billboard actually on the I-70 frontage road right over by the Country Western Wear. It's really nice. I drive by it many times a week. I don't find it to be very distractive, but it is highly visually appeasing. And I think that, we talked at length over this last weekend as far as the retreat and kind of where we're going in the future. And technology is the future, and we are trying to take a lot of things electronic, and we definitely want ways in which we can communicate with the city and neighbors outside of our community. I think that I really like the public-private partnership. I think that this provides us the opportunity that we've been talking about for years and having digital signage. We've talked about it at the Green at 38th, City Hall. And I think that this is a good revenue generation for the city as well. I think the static billboards are definitely looking old and tired. And I think that the opportunity to advertise multiple businesses as opposed to just one at a time offers benefits not only to the economic vitality of some of the either businesses here in Wheat Ridge and or our community. And I think it's a great idea. And I don't know if you've driven by the I-70 frontage road digital board. Yeah, I think it looks fantastic. So, and then that's a really good example of something that's fairly close. And that seems to be on private property. Is that why it's not regulated as such?
There are digital signs along I-70 in Wheat Ridge, but they're not billboards at the size that billboards are allowed to be.
So I guess my question for staff is what are the apprehensions that kind of triggered not allowing digital billboards versus allowing digital signage on a smaller scale?
That history probably predates me. The prohibition on digital billboards has been a policy since long before I started, and because it was a policy and not in code, we got pushback, which is why we codified it, but we didn't change the policy. Yep.
Thank you. Councilor Snell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Going back to kind of what Mayor Pro Tem Stites was getting at earlier, just a follow-up question around signage specifically on city property. This may be a silly question, but is there a way that we could offer advertising to our local businesses for a reduced rate?
Sure, I mean, it's your property, so you become the landlord, right? And it's an entirely different dimension than what, frankly, the city's commonly used to, or the council's commonly used to. Gosh, we're the public, we can't impose restrictions. This is private, on other private properties, but it's your property, and so you can, in fact, impose restrictions. RTD does it all the time and saying, okay, we won't allow cannabis advertising, for example. So, yeah, you could have a provision that would favor local businesses, because it's one of the kind of rare circumstances where you can act more like a private, landowner, because you are in this particular case. Yep.
Okay, got it. Thank you. And I'm envisioning also, I'm thinking about just the specific signage on city property. I'm just kind of thinking that that could be an additional way to get the word out about community events, calendar, things like that. So, yeah, thank you for that information. Appreciate it.
Counselor Weaver.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to just go through the recommendations and kind of ask questions based on that. So for billboards, we don't own any of that property for any of the billboards, right? Those are all private, and those are all, we've decided on the number, right? We don't own any of these?
Correct.
Okay. So I am okay. I drive by the Auraria campus one all the time. I think the sign is fine. I've driven by it at night. I've driven by it during the day. And I do think it does look new and fresh to Counselor Leah's, sorry. Counselor Dozman's comments, yeah. I would be interested in limiting the number, probably to less than 2, as far as driving through Wheat Ridge property, just because I do think the amount of changing boards, just having lived in some cities where they're along the highway and they're one every half block, and it is really, really confusing. So I would be interested in limiting the number. I also think it's an opportunity, and I don't know if the public-private partnership is available in this option, because I think the danger is that while, we had a discussion over the weekend about how do we get people off of I-70 into Wheat Ridge, Arvada could just as well advertise on those digital signs and say, come on over to Old Town Arvada, that's just taking a different exit. So I think that the danger is what can we restrict on those digital signs as far as the billboards? Because I do think it could work against us in a lot of ways. While I realize it could possibly, I don't know, it doesn't sound like it would really offer us revenue, because it's on private property, we would just allow it, right?
Yeah, the billboards we're talking about along I-70.
Yeah, just the
I-76,
billboards.
Those are on private property. The city, issues permits, but, and limits the number of them, but that's a time, place, and manner restriction. It's not
Right.
a content restriction.
So we can't
Here's-
restrict content.
Here's what you've got to say, here's what you can say, here's what you can't say.
Okay,
The city doesn't do that, as it does not tell, smaller sign owners,
Sure.
here's what you can say, here's what you can't say.
right.
The city does not do that, it's not allowed to do.
Okay. So that would make me less interested in pursuing digital billboards, simply because it doesn't sound like we get a lot of, like, it would be one thing if we could have a Wheat Ridge, come on in, we're doing the Carnation Festival.
And I believe they have offered up that type of arrangement where you could have, the city could have I think they have 8 slides per day or something.
I guess that-
City could-
yeah.
City could have one of those, that would be part of the private-public partnership.
But we couldn't limit Arvada from actually
Correct.
paying for it?
Correct, yeah. Yes, that's Mr. Dawson.
Okay. So yeah, I would be interested in learning more about that and bringing it back to study session. And just so I understand, when we say public messaging about emergencies and things like that, is that already a requirement of these digital billboards, that if there's some sort of Amber Alert or, so how does that, who decides what's going to go on a billboard for an emergency alert, if there is one?
Yeah, and that might be a question we sort of reserve for the industry and ask them to come back up. There may be other questions I defer to,
Okay, so that's a study, okay.
I think that it'd be worth, there's what you can require and there's what clearly the industry offers and does. And I want to make a distinction between those two. Remember, we're in the time, place, and manner restriction business for signs, not the content restriction.
Okay.
You know, saying, okay, you will provide 10% of the content has to be public service announcements geared toward public safety. You're really telling them about content, right? And you can clearly do that on a city-owned sign, because again, you're the owner. That, I get it, though, conflicts, my statement about, gee, you can't dictate content, conflicts with what you see out there, which is that there's public-facing content that clearly is not revenue generating. So the question is, well, why is that happening? And I think it's happening because the industry is offering that and providing that. But I question whether that's something you can build into, for example, your permit system. Hi, we'll give you a permit for this billboard, but you've got to reserve 10% of the content to say this.
Okay.
You know, they certainly say, we will do that, dynamite. And it may well be a situation where, just like in the zoning context, where I tell the council, you can't require this condition, but you can make it a permit condition if it is volunteered. So we go through this, to be very honest, a little bit of a waltz around that to get to a restriction, or in the zoning case, a condition that you wouldn't otherwise be able to impose under the law, but it's volunteered, it's freely volunteered, it's not something that you made happen as a result of your government power, which you don't have, remember, time, place, and manner, not content. I think that's why we're seeing these things out there, but it leads us to believe, I guess, gee, we can make that part of our regulatory scheme for billboards. And it forces me to have to explain that kind of conflict that we see, and that's how I explain it.
Understood, thank you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would be interested in finding out more about what that would actually look like. But I definitely would want not all billboards to be digital. I think we should, as far as on city-owned property, you know, I agree with Counselor Hulteen that I think it's something we should pursue. I also, though, am sort of, I don't know if we want to maintain all these signs, because as soon as we buy them and we try and maintain them, they look old. And so that would be the reason for doing some sort of public-private connection, partnership, for keeping those signs looking fresh. But again, I think it's about how many and where, and it sounds like we can regulate more of that content. So I would be interested in that. Is there a desire to explore changing code to off-premise signs for ad sales? How is that different? Is that what we were just talking about?
If you're so the three questions and recommendations, the middle category is, do we create a category called city-owned signs? And then the third question is, and do we entertain a public-private partnership on those
Okay,
signs?
so I answered.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
A little bit more information on that too. I'm not sure if council's aware. We are currently installing a message board at the rec center, which will be city-owned and managed and controlled with no public-private partnership. Lamar has recommended some other locations in the city they would like to partner with on the city. So we are currently in the rec center. It is allowed zone area and it's public property. The green, as another example, is currently in the mixed-use neighborhood zone district, which we don't currently allow. So if we want to allow these types of boards in other areas of the city, that's part of the discussion that we'll have to have. Do we want to amend the code to allow them in different areas of the city?
I would.
Or on just public property, I think is Lawrence.
Oh, just on public property?
Yeah, we could just do it not by zone district, but by
Can we talk about?
ownership of property.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'd also like to talk, I just think we have a bunch of really ugly changing boards around Wheat Ridge, and I think it's kind of sad. And I think they're too high, and I think they should be lower to the ground. And I think there's a larger conversation on signage that we should probably have, because the original conversation that we had, 10 years ago on Planning Commission, when the Starbucks, pardon? Well, we talked about the pole signs, but also the digital sign that was going to go in at the Starbucks that was facing the street and the lumens, and we learned all about the, brightness and all of these different things. And the whole landscape has changed since then. And I do think it would behoove us to sort of look at the whole thing, since we have this old legacy of we're not going to deal with, I can't remember the word, changing. Maybe we ought to look at it holistically is what I'm trying to say as we come back. Thanks.
Thank you. Counselor Larson.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And to follow up on that thought, I first want to talk about the first item here and make it very clear for our viewers at home that we're talking about billboards and the difference between billboards and signs. Billboards are very closely monitored and restricted. There are a limited number of billboards, and they're all along the I-70 corridor. I don't think anybody at home needs to worry about a billboard showing up on their street corner. Signs are a completely different matter, and signs are regulated depending on the sign and where it's located and how big the building is connected with. So there's a very big difference between a billboard and the limited number of billboards we have and a sign. When we talk about billboards, I've heard mention about revenue, and the way I look at it is that the company that owns the sign collects revenue from an advertiser. A portion of that revenue plus the monthly lease payment is paid to the property owner. The property owner then sends some of that revenue to the city in the form of taxes. So the city does benefit in terms of revenue from the existence of billboards. The fact that we've noted the appearance of a changeable sign in Arvada on I-70, I think, is a testament to the effectiveness of these signs, and how while not every billboard along the I-70 corridor would be subject to a changeable situation, one or two of them could, and I think it would certainly be aimed strictly at traffic on I-70. We talk about the character of Wheat Ridge as a place that people tend to drive through, and I-70 is probably the best example of that. There is, to me, there's absolutely no reason why we should not allow digital signs on I-70, digital billboards on I-70. Signs are a different matter. I'm going to limit my comments up till now strictly to billboards. I do want to come back and discuss the two items that we're looking at regarding signs. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Hulteen.
Thank you. Counselor Weaver actually made the point I wanted to bring up, in that if this is coming back, I think, revisiting signs a little bit more holistically and putting these in the context of our other sign regulations. I know we've done some digital sign regulations since I've been on council, but I just think, again, in the context of our corridors, we spent the weekend talking a lot about, the corridors are something that we're prioritizing the design and investments in, and at the end of the day, the signs are a big part of that. And so I think if we're going to be talking about changing the digital landscape on our corridors, I want that in the context of how we're looking at signs a little bit more holistically. So that would be my request. And then, I'm just not a fan of digital signs. I just think that they're, especially at night, I'm a little night blind at night. I have to drive with the yellow glass. I look like super grandma in my car. I put the yellow glasses on over my glasses, but as we're talking, I mean, in the room we've got Lamar and some semblance of industry representation who's talking to us about the angle in which you can see the light and the lumens and all of these things that Lamar has carefully studied and is able to talk to us about. But I mean, when we're talking about changing our regulatory environment, I mean, there are other players who could come into play. And so if this comes back, I mean, I would want to make sure that everything we're hearing about that sounds good from Lamar is something that we'd be expecting of anybody. I mean, I realize Lamar's pretty much got a monopoly on this, but, you know, this is the kind of thing that once we change to digital infrastructure, we don't go back. So I would want to make sure that all the things that sound good today are things that we're ensuring that people who aren't Lamar or Lamar in the future. But once we start changing digital things, I think we have to revisit too, because technology does change. So as we start to do more regulatory environment around technology, I think as a council for us to recognize the minute we start regulating technology, it comes back to us more regularly. And yeah, I think those are my two thoughts in this.
Thank you. Counselor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor. So I want to put it in two buckets. First, the billboard. I think when I first looked at this, I had a number in my head, and it was probably not much more than Councilmember Weaver, maybe 3 if we did digital, but I want to be clear that I would not be in favor of all of them becoming digital, just a couple. And maybe perhaps it might even be just one per district. We already limit, STRs, there's a certain amount per district. And it looks like the majority of these signs they're either in 2 or they're in 4 council districts. And so just having maybe, 1 to 2, somewhere in that neighborhood per district. And then the technology is emerging that I've been informed that not only do they have a directional, but they also have ambient light sensors so that it's not, which is good. And I know the technology has been around for car dealerships that it will change the intensity of the light based on the day. So if it's really cloudy, it's not going to be super, super bright. It's going to go down. And so I think there are on the billboard, there are some things to consider. And I do know that I think it would be interesting to have something that said, hey, Carnation Festival, whether that is a sign that happens in Wheat Ridge or if that happened on another type of than a Lamar sign, if that was the agreement. I think that would be interesting to have that kind of partnership. And then on the other bucket, the digital signs, I know that I've been advocating for, we try really hard in Wheat Ridge. We try postcards, we send out emails, we do newspapers, and still I get people, I didn't know that was going on. And I do know when I first moved to Wheat Ridge, we used to have a small, just digital, nothing fancy at the Anderson pool area. And I liked it because I could drive by and I would see like, oh, there's a car show going on the next 2 weeks, great. I would keep, every time I drive by that on 44th, I'd see that and I thought that's a great idea. And I think having our signage that we're going to be putting at the rec center, I think that's a good thing, and that will probably help people be a little more informed. And so looking at the public-private partnership, I think if we were, it's a little bit like we already lease out cell phone towers for the city hall. And so I would imagine that this would be something similar where they're not purchasing the property, they're leasing out that space, and perhaps we can write something in that lease that does not control the content of what's said, but maybe it has terms on there, and so that we can see if this is, if this is a good partner that would satisfy everybody. As far as size, before us, we have a little packet, and it seems like a lot of the signs that we're generally familiar with are in about that 4 to 8, 4 foot tall, 8 foot wide range, and we've seen those. We have an idea what it is. I'm comfortable with that size. Having said that, I know that we did have a lot of discussion on Planning Commission, and the City Council at that time was considering, the pole signs and whether or not the pole signs should be aesthetically modified or just keep them as is. And at that time, City Council decided, no, we're not going to impose, more aesthetics on there. But I think if we were to do some type of new signs, we should definitely, have that aesthetic criteria that these won't be pole signs, that these would be monument signs. And definitely, wherever that sign goes, it cannot, be in any type of site triangle. And so I don't know what that means. Where's that going to be as far as height? It can't be in the site triangle. But I think there might be some opportunity. My thought was just, I know is having signs that somewhere where we can inform the public this is what's going on. And, if we want an option on those, it sounds like we would have an option of maybe getting some income, or we'd also have the option of having more messaging. And so I think that's a interesting option. But as far as locations and then how many, that's something that we could decide. But I'd be supportive of having more conversation about these types of signs. And I want to make it clear that I'm really open to having the conversation, but I by no means, am thinking one way or the other. I'm just thinking like this is a good conversation, and I don't mean to upset anybody by thinking like let's having an open conversation about signage. So, thank you.
Before we go to questions, I've got a few myself. Lauren, the size on your handout that you gave us today, you have the actual EMC area. What does EMC stand for?
Oh, good question. Electronic Message Cabinet.
Okay.
So the portion of the overall sign that is the digital portion.
And these signs, none of these signs of the 5 that you gave us were digital signs, right? A changeable copy, reader board signs?
All 5 of these have a digital copy. So the little blue dotted outline is the portion of that
Okay.
sign, which is digital.
Okay, thank you. So
Yes.
that one
Sorry,
on
that
the
was not
Wheat Ridge
clear.
United Methodist Church.
Yes.
The area of that is 18.27 square feet.
Yes.
And then similarly on the
The union.
United Food
Yep.
Workers, number 7 is 24 square feet.
Yes.
Okay. And I understand, and maybe this is a question for Lamar, you all have talked about public-private partnerships for signage in Wheat Ridge. Can you talk a little bit more? And I have some questions for you. I understand. there
Steve
were two-
Cecil again with Lamar.
I understand there were 2 locations that you were interested in. What are those locations?
Yeah, there was a couple locations, and I truly didn't pick any of them. It was a collaboration between folks
I'm
with
not
the
going
city.
to charge you with.
Okay.
with
And so our thought is where is the best spot to get your message out? And that is the bottom line. I know we are in we're a publicly traded company, but the goal is whatever you all feel is the best location for that display is where we want to put it.
Okay.
And I think that's an industry thing. That's not a Lamar thing. I think everybody would agree. And what is that correct size? What is the correct message? And so with Lamar, we have a public advertising policy that we abide by. We share with all of our partners, whether it's RTD, which was referenced earlier, but it is something that we do not publish anything that conflicts with our moral beliefs, our core values, and our partnership's core values. So we want to ensure no matter who you partner with, we want the display to be where you want it, the size to be what you want it. But you have to get that message out. So the smaller it is, it's tough to read. So you got to get some kind of height, size, whatever that is, and we're here to help. So there, in the public-private partnership, there has been identified 3 or 4 locations, but we're not married to any of them. My wife would say I'm married to all of them. I've been married 23 years, but we're open to whatever you all think that the best spot is for those.
What are the sizes of your typical interstate billboard?
So on the interstate, because you're traveling like 75, whatever it is, those are typically around 14 by 48s because you're going so fast. When you're in the city limits, we call it a traditional poster size, which is a kind of a 10 by 22-ish. Sometimes it could be as small as an 8 by 16. It just depends on the flow of traffic because the whole goal is we want you and your citizens to read it. So interstate is completely different when you're going 65 plus miles an hour.
Right.
So it is significantly smaller when you're on the local roads, Wadsworth, Kipling, those type of routes. It's significantly smaller. And we wouldn't propose anything larger, just like the rest of the industry wouldn't as well.
And you have a micro poster size? What
It
size is that?
Yeah, that micro poster size is an 8x17. So it is a smaller size, and the lower you get to the ground, it's easier to read. However, the larger it is on the ground, it gets challenging. So you need it to be elevated if you're going to create a larger size display. So the lower the sign is, you want it smaller. The higher the sign is, you want it larger.
Right.
So the micro poster is meant for that monument style type sign to where it's low to the ground. Folks could read it. Sometimes a truck parked next to you will block it because it's so low, so you can't read it because it's now blocked. So it just depends on what style the city feels is right for that location. But there's so many different sizes out
Yeah.
there. And the Light Direct is significant. The Light Direct, where you can only see it on the intended audience, is huge. And that's an industry standard. It's not that's not a Lamar standard. That's an industry standard. If you say, I only want this audience to see it, you get that display.
But on this micro poster, that might be one that we might envision for the public-private partnership in town, which would sort of be 8 by 16 or 17 feet, so somewhere around 125 or 130 square feet.
Yeah.
Maybe looking at the wall, from the wall over to maybe where that blue bottle is, about that height right there, that would be it?
Yep.
More or less?
But imagine looking at it from 400 yards away.
Right.
Like, we're sitting in the room, it kind of, it's next to us. But when you're looking at it for 400 yards away, it's a cross read. You need to be able
Yeah.
to read it. But yes, that would be it, yeah.
But a pedestrian walking by it wouldn't be able to miss it, would they?
They would not be able to miss it. no.
Okay.
No, they would
Thank
not
you.
be able to miss it.
All right.
And if you said recycle your Christmas tree, or there's this intersection closed, please navigate differently, every pedestrian, every motorist would be able to read what you want your message to read. So it's there for traffic, emergencies, whatever you all want.
And how often do those messages usually change?
So CDOT, the state has a recommendation, or not recommendation, it's in their code, 4 seconds for dwell time. And what I mean by dwell time, we're not talking about a video. Like, there's no moving parts to this. It's a message, and then next second, it's another message. So CDOT says 4 seconds. Lamar, and I won't speak for the rest of the industry, Lamar has 8 seconds. So we double that dwell time is what we call it, so that you only see one message per event. So the event could be driving, the event could be walking, but you're only going to see one message, and that's every 8 seconds. And then the next 8 seconds, it could be emergency. The next 8 seconds, it could be visit Wheat Ridge. It could be whatever you all want, but it's 8 seconds dwell time.
So you're going to see about 7 or 8 messages per minute.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. And how many billboards do you all have in the city of Wheat Ridge?
Oh my goodness. That should be a question I know, right? I would say around 10 or so.
Around 10?
I'd have to look, because Wheat Ridge from west to east is about 4.5 miles on the interstate. I would say we have about 10 displays or so.
And if the sign guide's shown down on you, you'd like to change all of those into a reader board sign?
Yeah, the state doesn't allow that. So
Okay.
no matter what happens here tonight or in the future, the state has strict guidelines, and it's 1,000 feet between each electronic display, and they have to be conforming. So regardless of how many displays are in Wheat Ridge, if they're not conforming, you can't change them anyway. So as much as the industry would love to change them all, it can't happen. It's
And
based on
what makes some of the signs non-conforming?
historic zoning,
Okay.
primary use. If there was a lot that was zoned commercial, or if there was a lot that was zoned residential or agriculture prior to 1960s, 50s, it's non-conforming. So
Okay.
CDOT wouldn't allow.
There would be a
But there's-
change in the
Correct.
zoning code. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think those are my questions. Counselor Dozeman.
Sorry, I just had one other question that I forgot to ask earlier. Could you speak to the lottery system with the billboards as opposed, and this is for staff, sorry, as opposed to like first come, first served as we would typically do?
Yes, we use the lottery system for medical and recreational marijuana businesses, and we use the lottery system for billboards. I think that got actually put into our code before my time because of a lawsuit that came from the billboard industry. First come, first serve can be very difficult to manage. It used to be easier when you walked in and you had a paper timestamp and the clerk's desk right out front. But from a equity standpoint and whatever with the nature of that lawsuit was, the lottery was dictated to us, I believe. Do you have history on that?
Mr. Dahl will know all of this. so.
Yeah, well, it's a long history, as has been pointed out. And for the lottery system, we honestly ran into, and I think you probably run into some of the same challenges with the first come, first serve, which is in the lottery, it was, well, we were in with our application for the lottery at X amount of, but then we had to sustain and litigate challenges to whether the application that came in first was really complete. And if it wasn't complete, then actually, gosh, it was second. And whoever was second was actually first. And we spent months, more than months, in litigation over that. And I guess what it taught us is, and my takeaway, was that whether it's a lottery system or first come, first serve doesn't solve the problems of a lottery system, because you're still, people are still angling to be the one considered. And are angling to say the person that was in first really wasn't, because they were incomplete, because of this, because of that. And it's complicated, of course, when you can email something and when did that get received. So I guess I would be less hung up on the problems with quote lottery, and more, if we're going to go with that system, just have protocols in place to anticipate the arguments about whether or not an application that we got was complete or not. Because we can anticipate that whoever doesn't get chosen for whatever reason will have, and I have respect for it, a huge incentive to say whoever got picked inappropriately got picked. And first come, first serve doesn't solve that built-in competitive challenge. And they're going to compete, no question, because one billboard is enormously revenue producing and valuable in a given location. I honor that. So that's why I would say that first come, first serve doesn't solve problems of a lottery. You'll have those problems anyhow. And we just need to have protocols that tries to avoid as many of them as we can. That's my take on that. Yeah.
Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. Looking at the second item that we've been asked to consider tonight, establish a new sign category, allow such signs, provide consistent standards. I really think that this would be an opportunity for City Council to consider more or less an overhaul. Our sign codes are fairly extensive and don't cover a lot of, they specify things for signs that probably don't even exist anymore. I would like to see a sign code that incorporates billboards into a sign, an overall sign and billboard code, because as I looked at what we have now on our billboard standards, in the code, it says that a single-sided, two-sided, or V-shaped sign shall not exceed 750 square feet per sign face. And then, as we considered last month, the changes to some of the things going on at Clear Creek Crossing, now that Clear Creek Crossing is only a few steps away from building out, the design book that is part of the way the developers look at building stuff out at Clear Creek Crossing, the design code 7.2 includes discussion of the various signs that are allowed and how they're supposed to look. And as I mentioned, our billboard standard is 750 square feet for a billboard, but you can have a landmark ID sign at Clear Creek Crossing that is 900 square feet and could extend up to 75 feet in the air. It just seems inconsistent, and it seems like an opportunity for us to sort of normalize the various sign and various types of signs and billboards, and part of that ought to be a way to incorporate some way for the city code to include a way that we can control, or not control, but we can at least regulate digital signs, because they are definitely the wave of the future. Thank you.
Is there further discussion on this item before we go to the questions that staff has asked us to answer? Seeing none, why don't we go to the questions? These were on the page 4 of your packet. Number 1 is regarding billboards. Is there consensus to allow digital billboards in Wheat Ridge? Okay. Is there any comment on the number, spacing, or other potential regulations? Mr. Rome?
So you said the comment on the spacing, correct? And the size? For billboards?
Yeah, this is the comment on the number, the spacing, or other potential regulations.
I think my opinion is I think the number of billboards that are digital should probably not exceed 3. That's just my opinion.
Councilor Weaver?
Can we actually send that back to the study session? Because it sounds like there's state code that is going to come into
Okay.
this as well.
So we'd like to-
I'm not sure it's worth having
Okay.
a discussion right now.
We have consensus not to take a consensus at this time?
Is that okay?
I mean, we'll push that back to a study session.
Is that okay, Lauren? I mean, okay.
No, if there were any strong feelings, I would like to know now, so I'm not heading in the wrong direction, but we can bring you a slate of options when we bring this topic back. Correct. Yeah, if you say, since you just gave a consensus that you're interested in pursuing digital billboards, we will provide significantly more detail on what CDOT requires, what other communities require, what our recommendations would be for Wheat Ridge.
So on item number 2, we don't allow those now?
The
Digital
question-
signs on city-owned property?
Well, the question for number 2 is, because we have a different answer on what a sign can look like on almost every city-owned property, and because I think overhauling our sign code is not something we can do in the immediate term, do you want to, in the short term, create a category in the sign code that is sign on city-owned property? So we have the same size and height requirements, whether you're on Anderson Park or City Hall, whether you're in R2 or MUN or C1. Do you want to create that one category so that there's some predictability about what a sign looks like on city-owned property?
Councilor Dozman, did you have a question or a comment on that?
Yeah, I just had a question in regards to that. So it would basically be exempting the city from whatever zone is established on that, for that private property? Because not all of them are allowed to have digital signage.
Yeah, you could
Correct.
create,
So it'd be like just separating out city-owned property
Yeah.
from all the rest and allowing
you
it.
create a little
on
category.
public and
Signs
not
on
private.
city-owned property can be, here's the size limitations, height, et cetera, that can
Yeah.
be very different than any other.
We regulate signs based on both land use and zoning right now, because we have commercial uses in residential zones and residential uses in commercial zones. So it would be not out of the ordinary for us to create this separate category.
Councilor Weaver, did you have okay. And is this something that we would want, we've got, what drove this was sort of industry coming and say, we want to do change the billboard signage, and we have this public-private partnership. So we're sort of interjecting a new realm in this on city signs.
The public-private partnership will be the next question. So this is sort of the intermediate question. Do you want to have sort of one set of rules that dictates what signs look like on city-owned property?
Right.
And there has been, there has been discussion for many years, I think from previous council members about
Correct.
wanting more digital signs. And we just, again, we won't, like on the green, we currently don't allow it. So this would allow that, if you create a separate use for public property.
Mr. Dahl?
May I thank you. I think it might be helpful to remember that the public-private partnership concept is really only relevant to the signs on city-owned property where you have a partnership with the public, have a partnership with industry about whether or not you would contract with them with one provider, several providers to provide those signs and to provide advertising that makes it worth it, and public service and city-related announcements as well. So in terms of the questions, question one on billboards is really not a public-private partnership question. Question two is, gee, do you want to create a category of sign types and sizes on city property, but not yet decide who gets to be on those signs? That's question three, which is, would you be interested in a public-private partnership concept for the use of those signs on city property? And you could still say no to that and decide that you're going to go out and build them and operate them yourselves. And I'm jumping ahead to number three, but what I wanted to try to make more clear for the council is what you're voting on in number two isn't deciding you'll contract with Lamar or anyone. It's, do you want to create a category, a zoning category for signs on city property that's kind of unique? No question, it would allow you to decide, well, we don't care about how big signs can be, at Clickery Crossing or at the Applewood Shopping Center. On city property, by gosh, they can't be any bigger than whatever, and you'd have the right to do that. Thanks.
Okay, so then regarding digital signs on city-owned property, is there a consensus to come back to a study session to talk about a new category of signs? Looks like we have that in the affirmative. And is there consensus to explore changing the code to allow off-premises signs and the potential for ad sales and revenue sharing, public-private partnership arrangements for city-owned signs? Okay, looks like we have consensus to do that. Are there any other questions that you needed to have answered?
I think that's it.
Tonight?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming in. We'll now go to agenda item number 2. And this is a discussion of our 2025 legislative agenda.
Now's our chance to eat crunchy food.
What do you want? Snacks?
Mr. Goff.
The book for Lauren. Oh, Lauren, before you leave. Sorry. This is for you. Thank you, Mayor. We have Cole and Mary Ann here
All right.
to.
Come.
Yeah, you
Bring
can
it
sit here.
here.
Oh, sweet.
You sit here.
Yeah, okay. Sit here.
Take all my.
Take your crap with you.
That's fine, it's fine, it's fine. I really did make.
I need one of those things that fancy restaurants.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is a mess.
I really did make a mess. I feel kind of bad about it.
Get it.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. You may recall back in December, Mr. Hayslip here and our legislative committee introduced the legislative agenda to you all. At the time, it was just informational and we were not looking for consensus yet at that time. Tonight, they are ready to go ahead and look for consensus. So I will turn it over to Cole here to kick us off.
Thanks. I'll start by giving a brief overview as a reminder of what the Legislative Advocacy Program is, and then shortly talking about the legislative agenda for a little bit before handing it back over. So to begin with, in September of last year, the council gave consensus to implement a 4-part legislative advocacy program. It consists of a legislative agenda, which lays the foundation for the city's position on legislation, the legislative committee, which reviews legislation and gives city council recommendations to adopt advocacy position resolutions. And then if those advocacy position resolutions are adopted, the final part is lobbying on the legislation that is the subject of those APRs. So moving on to the legislative agenda, this document was developed in collaboration with each of our city departments and with input from the legislative committee. It consists of 10 focus areas. Each focus area is followed by a short description of that focus area, and then about a paragraph on the type of legislation in that focus area that the city would support, and about a paragraph on the legislation that the city would oppose. So those 10 focus areas are home rule, community development, economic development, affordable housing, homelessness, public safety, infrastructure, and transportation. That's just one. Sustainability, parks and rec, and administrative services. Also included in the legislative agenda are 5 key themes. These are things that we found throughout each of the focus areas, and they really set forward the values for this legislative agenda and the advocacy program as a whole. And those themes are community-centered solutions, equity and accessibility, statewide collaboration, local control, and opposing unfunded mandates. So tonight, we are asking for feedback from the City Council on if there's anything that should be included in this legislative agenda that's not already there, if there's anything that should be removed, or if there's anything that should be amended. And in addition to that, we're also asking for consensus to move this forward and consider adopting the legislative agenda at the February 10th City Council meeting. That concludes my presentation. I'll hand it back over to the mayor.
Okay, thank you very much, Cole. Councilor Weaver.
I just wanted to clarify, this is the committee that Counselor Hulteen and why am I losing everybody's last names? And Counselor Larson was on. Was there anyone else?
Yes.
And the mayor. Okay, I didn't know that the mayor was on too. This is fantastic. So thank you all. And I know, I understand that there's been quite a bit of work that went into this. I really, really appreciate it. And I really think the way it was written is really thoughtful. And it was super easy to read with proposed and opposed. So thank you for this. And I am really excited about it. And I think it's solid. So you're getting my vote.
We have one thumb up.
You have one thumb up from me, so thanks.
Okay.
But seriously, I know it was a lot of work, and I really, really appreciate the three of you, and Cole as well, and everyone who worked on it, so.
Yeah.
Am I missing anyone?
Councilor Rowan.
Thank you, Mayor. And I would agree with Councilmember Weaver. This looks like you guys have been doing it for like 5 to 10 years. It was, yeah, this looked really great, and I am in full support of it and really appreciate everybody's effort in putting this together. Very easy to read. Love the red light, green light. So thank you.
Okay. Looks like we've got 2 thumbs going for the 3rd thumb. Councilor Hulteen.
Some days I have 3 thumbs of my own. I come up with the 3rd. First, I just really want to thank and recognize Cole's work. He makes everybody look good when you're working on things like this. So thank you, Cole, for bringing your expertise. I think there's a lot about this that is exciting to me. Our city is shaped by what happens at the Capitol, and we just, as long as I've been on council, have not been really dynamically engaged as a body in that conversation. There's a tremendous volume of work that goes through a legislative session. So in addition to having a really clear framework that is legible and in like everyday terms that is accessible not just to us, but to our community, it really gives us the ability to monitor and take strategic action in a way that is going to help us be better advocates for our community. We, within the committee, have been discussing how to prioritize what we capture as it races through the Capitol, and this is an important first step. And one thing I want to acknowledge is that, like, we have a nice red light, green light system in this package, but legislation engagement is much more complicated. And where we really are going to be strong advocates for our community is when we are stepping in to amend for legislation to pivot to best benefit our city. So one of our qualifying criteria we're talking about in our small but mighty committee of 3 people is, what is the benefit to our city? And I think the conversations we had over the weekend at the retreat really will inform what those priorities are, because we really can only engage in a handful of bills in a really meaningful way. But this is the first time since I've been here that we're really stepping in proactively to get under the hood of the Capitol and advocate for the city. So I really am grateful to be working with the mayor and Councilmember Larson and Cole on this, and looking forward to bringing the conversations back to this table. The other thing we talked about that's really exciting is we sit with our representatives at this table every year and kind of have a dialogue, but this is the first year that we're going to be presenting our priorities to them. So I think it strengthens our relationships. Yeah. I mean, before we've kind of been a little bit more ad hoc, and our voice is uniform as a body of elected officials and as a staff who contributed to this. So really strong document. I think this is exciting work, and it does look like we've done it for a while, but we have not. So thank you so much.
All right, thank you. We're moving from ad hoc to thumbs. So I got 3 thumbs. We'll go to Councilor Dozman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I agree. Very well done, easy to read, and I think this really captures very well what we spoke about in regards to Wheat Ridge being independent-minded and being our own unique community and really tailoring our policies to meet the needs of our community. And I agree with Councilmember Hulteen, like, we really haven't been in this arena, at least strongly, and I appreciate all the work that went into this, and I'm really looking forward to us presenting this at the legislative update, and just kind of getting feedback. And thank you for all your work. I know that as Lauren was sitting here, I was like, the work never ends. Like, it's always just added to your plate, and you guys just take it in stride, and you guys manage it so well. And this was incredibly done, so thank you.
Great. Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor, and I would like to add my comments to what Councilmember Hulteen has just said, that this represents, I think, a big step for us on council, and having gotten the sort of foundational stuff out of the way now, we are ready to go. I think the 3 of us now are looking forward to being able to actually to focus in on the important issues that will come in front of our legislators in the Capitol. The important thing, I think, for the council to understand is that we will be meeting every 2 weeks during the session, and during those 2 meetings, we will have an agenda in front of us, and we'll have some things to discuss, but it will be strictly business, and we'll get through this because I know the mayor will be watching the clock, and we will get things done. No 2 ways about that. So I appreciate your confidence in the 3 of us, and certainly the confidence in Cole is well founded. Thank you.
I sort of see that thumb moving sideways. Mayor Pro Tem Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I, again, want to echo everybody's thank you to you all for stepping up to do this, and very excited to be able to speak with our state senator, our state representative, and have a plan of action. And Councilor Larson actually just answered my question. I was going to ask how often you guys are going to meet during the session to be able to keep up with all those changes. So every 2 weeks, I assume, is a good amount of time. But And I appreciate you guys as well, keeping us informed throughout that process, because as we've seen the last couple of years with some of the bills that have come through, we see it once, and then a couple of months later, a couple of weeks later, it looks completely different, and we go from opposing or go from opposing and hoping for amendment to completely oppose, or something that we can actually work with. So really appreciate the hard work from you guys, and I look forward to seeing the continued product. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have anybody else. Oh, Counselor Snell?
Just really quickly, I'll start with, this is a huge thumbs up for me. I feel like this is so well timed right after our retreat. A lot of the discussions that we had on Saturday are in here. It's like you meant to put it on this study session. But seriously, this is great. And also, I think I'm thinking about some of the things that I read, and thinking about some responses of residents, during different Let's Talk sessions. You could put those right in here, cut and paste. I mean, this is a good reflection of, where we are, what people are asking for, popular topics to move our city ahead. So thank you, all of you, for the extra work. This looks great, and I am really excited to hear more. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thanks, everybody, for sort of that thumb discussion, if you will. I want to congratulate Cole, because he's really done the yeoman's work on this, on putting this thing together. He's done a great job. Enough of the thumbs. We are looking for consensus to move this to council for a formal adoption. You got to raise your hands on this one. Okay. We have consensus to move this to a motion. So yeah, thank you. Okay, so that concludes the two study items that we had, and we will go then to staff reports. Mr. Goff.
Thank you, Mayor. You all received an email. You should have. You may not have seen it yet. I sent this morning. I forwarded from Lauren summarizing current action that's being undertaken by Intermountain Healthcare. They've submitted a service plan to the city for approval for the creation of a metropolitan district for the Lutheran campus. Part of that process requires them by state statute to provide a notice to the adjacent neighborhoods. Those notices were sent and received. There was about 80 notices, so it's a very small border. The notice has caused some confusion, and I know some of you have received emails and phone calls, probably from all the same person. We're scheduled to discuss this with City Council next Monday night at a special study session right after the regular meeting, and then it'll come back if Council approves for approval on February 24th. In short, the creation of a metro district will only directly impact the property and the property owners within the Lutheran campus. But state law requires that the adjacent neighborhoods are noticed of this. So that's where the confusion comes. The letters is kind of confusing, but if you read it closely, it does say that this only impacts the 100-acre campus. So Lauren and her staff, of course, as always, responded quickly and put up information on our What's Up Wheat Ridge page under the Lutheran tab. So there's a really good story about what metro districts are, what they're not. And then I've also asked Intermountain to send a follow-up letter to those about 80 residents explaining a little bit more about what this is and what it's not. So they've agreed to do that. They're a little embarrassed that this has happened, and so hopefully those things will help clear up some of the confusion. Any questions about that? Okay, you'll learn a lot more next Monday night. Thank you.
Is that it? Okay. Elected officials reports. Any reports to Councilor Hulteen?
Thank you. I actually have a couple of requests tonight. So and this is something I could have done in an email, but I haven't gotten on my city email today. The sign on 38th Avenue when you are going eastbound that's notifying that Wadsworth is closed. So there's a variable message sign that's like right in the middle of the road.
Okay.
And its placement is really close to the intersection of 38th and Carr. And if you are turning left onto Carr, the sign actually is blocking the left turn lane.
Okay.
And Carr is one of the through streets, and I've twice seen like close calls because it's, so anyway, so if they could, it's long, yeah, and it's gonna be there long enough. And then just another small request, I think there was an accident in 29th and Wadsworth, and there's a bunch of broken concrete and asphalt blocking the ADA pans for access through that intersection, so. Just two little public works requests. Yeah, right here, like coming out of Crown Hill. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. The first item I'd like to call everybody's attention to is the Facebook post today from our police department. And the headline is "Crime in Wheat Ridge in 2024 dropped more than 6%." And that's about as good news as I've gotten all day. Across the board, the incidence of crimes in the city of Wheat Ridge has gone down, and in some cases gone down dramatically. The only area to make note of was theft, and it's pointed out that the majority of the theft cases reported in the city are by Wheat Ridge businesses, and this issue has already been addressed by our police department with their loss prevention team to work with the retailers to curb the influx. And if anybody saw that video that was posted earlier in the week of the arrests that were made regarding a stolen vehicle, I think that hopefully that gets the message out as clearly as we can that Wheat Ridge is not a place to commit a crime. The next item I have is a fact that we got, now that we've gotten the Clear Creek Crossing moved on to its final phase here. I did see news releases from two new businesses that have already said, okay, we're going to be at Clear Creek Crossing, and one is the brewing company, Prost, and the other one is Bird Call. Both of these businesses will be opening in Clear Creek Crossing when everything gets finalized out there. And then the last thing I wanted to point out is the item that our Parks and Recreation Department posted the other day to Facebook, and this says that the City of Wheat Ridge offers matching grants for hazardous tree removal. If you've got a tree that's causing a problem, that's maybe leaning up against a power pole or utility pole or something like that, there is a form that you can go to the Rooted in Fun page for Parks and Recs and fill out that form, and your request will be examined, and the grant program runs through September or until all the money runs out. But that's something, if you've got an older tree or a tree that is presenting a hazard to maybe your neighbors or the community, you probably want to look into getting a grant to have it repaired or removed. Thanks.
Counselor Weaver.
Thank you, Mayor. My apologies for being late tonight. I had an interesting experience at my house and just had some questions. At about 6, I found a man in my living room asking me for a sandwich, who had come off the street, and I did actually make him a sandwich. And it was a homeless person who had just walked down 38th Avenue, and it wasn't, dangerous, or he wasn't hostile. But it did occur to me that just, it would be nice. We have such a great network now of homeless interaction, and it just occurred to me that I would have liked to have had more information, because I sort of, I wasn't going to engage that much, because I was only being asked for a sandwich, and then this person left, but just what I might have said, because it wasn't sort of something where I felt like I needed to call the police, because this person was clearly intoxicated or something. And so it was just an interesting experience. That's why I was late to make a sandwich. But does that make any sense? So just, I only had bagels, so I made a bagel sandwich. But It had some cheese and sausage on it. I asked if there was vegetarian meats. There wasn't. But no, just what is a kind way? Because obviously these things are going to happen in our community, and just trying to treat all humans kindly. What should I have said? Who should I might have called? Should this person have needed something in
Sure,
light
yeah.
of our
Yeah.
navigation
No, it's a great
program?
question.
You know,
We do have some one flyers that we've distributed in the past. We'll get those back out to you that have
Yeah.
information on who you can have them call.
I know they were sort of big. Is there something
Yeah.
small, like, because
we have both,
interestingly,
maybe.
he came in and took the flyer that I had out for emergency animal evacuation, so he was interested in
That worked.
that. And, but yeah, it would have been nice to just say, hey, you know,
Yes.
here are the available resources, because I just wasn't equipped to go further,
Yeah,
but
we'll-
felt like I would have.
We'll get more of that back out to you guys.
That would be
I
great.
think
Thank
there's
you.
different versions.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, additional reports? All right, we will be back here at a regular meeting next Monday at 6:30. So I hope everyone will join us. If you're joining us online, come back next week. We'll have more action. So if there's no more business to come before us, we will stand adjourned and have a safe trip home.